Happy summer, happy off season, and welcome into a special episode of Six Rotations. I'm Daniel Gilman. So happy to be with you all today. We're at the end of June, and I'm joined once again, as always, by the legendary championship head coach in Mick Haley. And we're just here to check in, maybe give you guys a little bit of an update on where some of the biggest names from the offseason has gone. We do have a tremendous interview for you at the end of this show. But first off, as always, we're brought to you by SNA Sports, better equipment for a better game. And Mick, before I ask you what you've been doing here in this offseason of 2023, of course, a reminder that our champions in Texas will have a great schedule. Once again, we're going to go through a couple of the biggest schedule announcements, as well as talk about the new Pro Volleyball Federation that seems to be grabbing all of the attention. But we've got a fantastic interview to talk about the transfer portal, Mick, and that's what I want to talk to you about to start this off. One of the biggest names in the transfer market. In fact, the two names were both from Ohio State in Mac Pedraza and Kylie Murr. And we've got Kylie Murr, the superstar libero, to join us here at the end of the show, talking about her move to the new look Minnesota Golden Gophers. But Mick, what has been your mindset here in 2023? The transfer portal has been with us for a few years. What's the headspace for maybe some of the old guard thinking about this new way that sports is?
Well, it's real interesting to me to see if people can use the portal to win the championship with. We've looked at it in its onset. It looked like it was pretty effective. But right now, I only see 3 or 4 schools putting themselves in position with transfers to win the championship. Of course, that's quite a few when you think about it. I see a lot of people, though, positioning themselves better, picking up a transfer or two. Penn State, just to give you an example, picked up 2 in primary positions, point scoring and setting. Those kinds of things change positions for sure. Will it be enough to win? Don't know yet.
Well, of course, so much of the talk from the Final Four this past season in Omaha was how many of these new transfers were going to bring impacts. And of course, watching Texas bring it all down and the new look, University of San Diego with their transfers led by Gabby Blossom. Well, the Toreros are revved up and they are reloaded again. We're going to get to some of the biggest transfers around the conferences and around the nation here in a minute. But Mick, why don't you enlighten us with maybe what your travels have been like here in the last month or two? Obviously, always traveling as a spokesperson for the volleyball sport. Where have you been?
Well, I've been in Italy. I've been in Slovenia. Just getting ready to go back to Croatia, and I'll finish in Scotland and Ireland. But I had a great trip in Italy following both the Minnesota women's club team, Northern Lights, and the boys, Milwaukee Sting, in a tournament in Italy, just watching what was happening with international teams and what techniques they're teaching, new things that are happening. I got to view a great teaching device, a factory in Italy that puts out a great teaching device in a ball gun that can set, hit, or serve. Can't hit, sorry, it can shoot for defense or serve. It really is the best teaching device I found. It does not damage the volleyballs. I've been working with First Point. I was in Ottawa for the NVL men's opener in Ottawa, Canada. Saw the USA go 3-1, lost only to Brazil in the final, but went 3-0, 3-0, 3-0. And in the new scoring system for VNL and qualifications for Olympics, 3-0 wins are very important. So you get points for every win. They all are added up at the end, and they help you qualify for the Olympics. So all those things are important. So that was fun to watch John Spraw's group. They look pretty comfortable. That was a pretty good group we had. The other teams did not have all their players yet. So it'll be interesting to see how the matches turn out. I haven't seen the scores from last weekend and this coming weekend, but the championships are in Anaheim pretty soon, so that's fun. And then I spent a lot of time with First Point Volleyball Foundation. That's a foundation that I'm a volunteer member of that raises money to help promote boys volleyball in high schools as well as university programs. That group has raised over $5 million at this point, and they had their board meeting in Ottawa. They're gone for their second meeting, which is really their second fundraising session, which is really going to be a 20 million ask. So they're really going to kick it up, hopefully to get a Big Ten men's, help get a Big Ten men's conference going and some other things. So I'm pretty excited, but I've been busy.
Well, it's certainly been a busy off season for new announcements, and you talk about conferences in the Big Ten. Well, the Big Ten hasn't necessarily made the big moves in terms of the realignment. That was, of course, last year with the huge announcement of USC, UCLA, and I've been kind of in the inner talkings and hearing about the new conversations, and UCLA and USC did just have a big call with the Big Ten and the Big Ten conferences here in the last week to try to get everything lined up. But Mick, it's the other conferences that are starting to make some noise. And let's talk a bit about it. The Big West Conference, for the first time, is going to have a tournament this November. That's going to be huge news leading up into Thanksgiving weekend. So no longer will it be the regular season champion between Hawaii and Santa Barbara and Cal Poly and Long Beach State. Of course, the new look Hildebrand-led Long Beach State that made a little bit of waves last season. Now, the regular season will just line up for the one bid potential of a conference tournament hosted by the Beach this upcoming November. What do you think about the announcement of a new? I love it, right? Like, I want to get out there. I think a conference tournament should be mandatory for every conference. It adds a degree of excitement for fans and especially broadcasters who follow a season throughout. But there are definitely negatives. Like if Hawaii goes through and has a perfect season or, a one-loss conference season, but they get muddled up in the non-conference play, and then let's say a team like Davis upsets them in the early rounds of the Big West tournament, then you might not necessarily get him in as an at-large, and that would certainly bother some people out in the islands.
Well, it used to be that the coaches hated having a tournament at the end of the season before they went into the tournament, NC2A tournament, simply because they were playing the same teams that they had to handle all year long. On the other hand, coaches are more interested in a tournament if it gives them additional opportunity to get into the NC2A tournament. And so the question is, do these tournaments or will these tournaments allow teams to better themselves and maybe get into the NC2A tournament when they couldn't before? I think tournaments help the committee in selection, because a lot of times they go on matches that were a month or 2 months ago that maybe the personnel and the play of the team has changed at this point. So I think that might help. I'm interested to see how many conferences decide to have a tournament. A lot of the smaller conferences do, because they only get one team to go in the tournament, and they make that conference championship the team that gets in the tournament. But how about the bigger conferences, the ones that have been getting 6, 7, or 8 in the tournament? Will this hurt them?
Yeah, I just don't think, having talked to the Big Ten coaches last season at the media days, and of course you can still, if you haven't seen that episode of the Roundabout talking from, Sheffield and Shondell and Leah Johnson and Jen Flynn Oldenburg, it didn't quite seem reasonable from the coach's perspective, just to have it all geared up towards the first round. You've got to then play 3 games in 3 days or 4 matches in 4 days, and then turn around 2 days later, find out who you're playing, 2 days later, fly out or get ready to host. So I don't think the bigger conferences are necessarily ever going to get towards that tournament unless the money talks, right? We've seen that in sports throughout 2023. Money talks. And the reason why, the SEC in college football had a conference championship in 1990 was because CBS was pushing it so hard, was because every single team in the SEC was going to get $500,000. So the incentives were there, but I'm not quite sure that's ever going to get to a point unless, BTN or Fox decides to throw a bag at the conference championship or conference tournament. So I'm not sure that's going to happen, but we do have another big shakeup in terms of the conference realignment, and that's going to be with our new look Big 12, right? If you guys haven't learned or remembered the news, this will be the last season that Texas and Oklahoma are in the Big 12. So we are in what is called a transition year with BYU, UCF, Houston, and Cincinnati all in the Big 12, with Oklahoma and Texas still hanging around for another season. So if you're bored at home and you're not quite sure how it'll look, I recommend just going to, Texas, Oklahoma, Oklahoma State, Texas Tech, some one of the websites, maybe not Oklahoma State, but
Yeah, I was
Houston,
gonna say.
UCF, yeah, not Oklahoma State. But go look at it. They've got some weird setups, right? Baylor is going to go to Texas twice, but Texas Tech is only going to face Baylor and Texas once, both on the road, but they'll go to BYU twice. It's a very unique schedule, and I certainly do not envy the schedule makers there. What's been your perspective and your opinion of how these conferences, and especially, Sun Belt last year added James Madison and had the shakeup with their new additions, how different conferences are going to have to deal with all of the fluctuation here in the next year or two?
Well, I think Sun Belt was ahead of the curve. They figured out that scheduling makes a big difference in RPI. And no matter how much the committee says they don't pay attention to RPI, you and I both know that RPI plays a great, great thing in the selection of teams. So what's happened is the coaches have gotten a bit smarter. They've decided to schedule their best teams in the conference against each other and not schedule a complete double round robin. I think the Big 12 is actually practicing this on the QT a little bit, in that here's what happens. If Baylor and Texas are two of the top teams in the Big 12 and they play twice, and for instance, Texas or Baylor does not play one of the bottom ranked teams but once, their RPI is going to be higher than if it would be had they played everybody twice. So the Sun Belt figured this out, and they put a schedule together where the top 6 in that conference, or top 7 in that conference, played each other twice and played the other teams once. And that raised their RPI of the whole conference. They had 3 teams that legitimately could have gotten into the tournament. Now, they only got one, but they were real close. And if they continue to mix and match their schedule right, they can get a schedule that complements their RPI and not takes away from it. I jump back to your conference situation of championships in the conference. Another reason for not playing complete round robins would be playing the best teams against each other and then having a conference tournament and then having a week off before the NC2A tournaments start. There is some thought that they're manipulating the schedule like that to give their teams a chance to recover from the tournament, still get the exposure and reap the television benefits of a tournament, and reap the RPI benefits from playing maybe a third time. Think about it. If Stanford and Washington or Stanford and Oregon were the 2 best teams in the Pac-12 and they played each other 3 times, win or lose, their RPI is significantly higher than if they played one of the bottom ranked teams.
Yeah, no, that's a good perspective. And, it's certainly interesting. And I'm curious to see, of course, how UCF is going to revamp their program, because Todd Dagenais, that we're going to talk about, he made the move. It was probably the most shocking off-season decision in the women's volleyball landscape, that this, highly acclaimed, probably, maybe one of the best mid-major options, and now, of course, in a Power 5 conference, 4 head coaches on the block in Dagenais. And, Melville just graduated last season, so you never knew what movement he was going to make. But now Dagenais is going to be on the move, and he will be the head coach of the Atlanta Pro Volleyball Federation team, which is certainly interesting. You of course saw the move of Amy Pauley too, the USC associate head coach. She's going to be coaching in Orlando. So I'm very interested to see if UCF will continue their groove and continue the success that they've had in the volleyball world the last few years, or if they will have a tough time adjusting to the Big 12 world. It's going to be a very difficult transition for some of these teams. I have no doubt that BYU and Heather Olmstead's crew will just click right into gear. I would pick them to finish in the top 3. But of course, aside from Texas, who would be, I want to hear, let's get one, let's get frisky here at the end of June. Let's get one surprise pick from you in the Big 12.
I got it.
Who do you got?
Houston.
Okay.
Houston has retooled. They were so tough last year. They beat Dagenais at the end of the season in their conference tournament, but they've added 4 or 5 players to that roster, and they are well disciplined. I would think everybody'd be talking about BYU and Central Florida coming in, but Houston, I believe, is a top 3 team in that conference, and Texas has to play them at Houston. I don't know if Baylor plays them and where that match is, but that is something to watch out for. And BYU's entrance, they seem to have been kind of plateauing here the last year or two. Haven't really seen a surge out of that group. Not normal for Olmsted's coaching acumen. So I would expect she's going to come with something too. But I put a star next to Houston, and a dark horse would be TCU. Nobody talks about TCU. They've been sneaky about adding players. They got Para to transfer from Texas, an unused the left side hitter from Mexico, played on the Mexican national team. Jason Williams up there does a nice job of coaching. I would expect him to cause a lot of trouble, not challenge for the championship, but beat a bunch of teams.
All right, so here we go. I'm going to line this up for you. Texas has to go to Houston twice in October. Baylor will finish their season at home against Houston. Of course, Baylor is very familiar or very similar to me, like a Penn State from last year, where it's like, we thought the other shoe was going to drop. We thought it was going to be a rebuilding season for McGuire. Same with Shoemaker Colley. And instead, they were both much better than anticipated last season. But before we move on from the Big 12, let me correct you there. UCF did win the AAC tournament in 5 sets over Houston. Melville went for like 38 kills, but Houston got them at home in the regular season. So that was UCF's one lone loss in conference play. Sorry. That was at Houston, but it wasn't in the conference tournament. But you did tease a couple of our names, and the Big 12 is in the center of our transfer topic. So let's go ahead and show you some of our big names. I grabbed 25 names, maybe a little under that, to try to see, at least from the fans' perspective, who are the biggest names. So we're going to start here with some of the biggest in the Big Ten. And of course, the Big Ten is going to rule the day. They've got the only volleyball media days. That's coming up on August 1st and 2nd. So keep your eye on social media, as we'll have some great content out of there as well. But all of the buzz starts in Happy Valley. Katie Shoemaker-Cawley, she made the right calls, Mick, and it has to start with getting the prized possession out of Columbus in Mac Pedraza, and then a bit of a surprise as Jess Merzick also makes the trip in the Big Ten. She moves from Michigan to Penn State. Do you think that Penn State's two, as you look at here, you see Penn State, Wisconsin grabbing Temi Thomas, Ilara, and Carter Booth. Those seem to be 4 of the biggest moves. Do you think Penn State or Wisconsin win this offseason?
I think Penn State's questionable only because Merzick's, in my opinion, is underachieved. I think the kid, from the time she was an 8th grader, was a #1 recruit out there. I was recruiting during that time and really wanted that kid, but for some reason, maybe it's been the setting, she hasn't produced. So maybe the addition of Pedraza setting her makes her a lethal left side attacker for Penn State. And if that happens, Penn State's in the hunt. But I have to tell you, I like Carter Booth. I don't know what happened to her at Minnesota because she started off gangbusters, and I thought she was going to be a difference maker. And then she just kind of, settled in, so to speak, and didn't become a dominator. I think she is the one I have starred. So I think Wisconsin still has a good chance of winning that battle between the two, the Penn State and Wisconsin. I think probably Wisconsin is on top, and they've matched anything Penn State did as far as transfer people.
And of course, I have to start with those two teams, because who can forget that unbelievable match in the Fieldhouse in the Sweet 16 last December? It was on my birthday, if I'm not mistaken. I think it was the 8th, where Wisconsin jumped out to the 2-0 lead. Penn State took sets 3 and 4, and then Wisconsin slammed the door on this very surprising Nittany Lions team in the first year of Shoemaker-Cawley's reign. So I cannot stress the importance of those meetings this season. Of course, everyone's got to talk again about the rematch of 2021, where Nebraska and Wisconsin had those lopsided matches last season in favor of the Badgers. So let's talk a little bit about Nebraska. Of course, we're going to talk to Kylie Murr in a little bit so we can kind of save a lot of our judgments about her movement. I can't wait to hear about the Keegan Cook effect in Minnesota. You have to imagine that probably had some of the impact to the movement of Murr there, and maybe Booth moving away. And there's been so much kind of fluctuation there, not knowing that McCutcheon was going to leave. And I'm sure players might have been blindsided a bit by his retirement. But Nebraska is going to be playing in front of 80,000 fans on August 30th against Omaha. Yes, mark your calendars. That's going to be so fun to watch. The tickets sold out in like 45 seconds or a minute and a half. So that is maybe one of the more exciting talking points here, but it'll lead us towards the new movement to Nebraska. And this is, of course, popping up here in Merritt Beeson. And you and I, and of course, as an alum of Florida, I've been watching the Gators, and Merritt Beeson is head over heels, maybe the most talented transfer in the portal this season.
Yeah, two things. We should mention, going on to Nebraska, but mention that Wisconsin did lose Demps.
We'll get to that.
They called on her from time to time, but Beeson is really the critical player in all of the transfer portal, as far as I'm concerned. Nebraska needed to fill a right side position. They lost their right side, who I really liked, but Beeson comes in, moves into that position, and is a big time point scorer. And with a quality setter, Nebraska will be lethal with the addition of Merritt Beeson, because she is just really, really good. She's national team caliber right away. I love Beeson. I think she's one of the best players in the country.
And then as we look at a few of the rest, we can't go through one by one, but, Jenna Wennis moving from Minnesota to Texas, the Longhorns kind of gearing up again, and Wennis has so much versatility. And then Oregon adds a few names in Gabby Gonzalez from Ohio State. That's a big move. Kara McGee was on the move as well from the Ducks. How about Jess Robinson to Duke? Michigan, of course, loses Merzick, loses Robinson. Robinson, a bit of an under-the-radar move. Duke, a team that you wouldn't necessarily, look at twice, but she is someone that can go and make some noise there. Same with May Pertovsky moving from Michigan to Washington. Those were just some names out of the Big Ten that popped out to me. What about you?
Yeah, I think all of those are good additions for those teams, but I don't think they're game changers. And I think they help those teams a great deal. I'm not sure I'm not sure that was a smart move by Wennis. She's going to get in a battle for position there at Texas, when she was a starter and a big time point scorer for Minnesota. I liked her on the left side better than the right side. Hugh moved her over to the right side. I really liked the freshman he had on the right side. So it'll be interesting to see where Wennis plays and if she plays moving to Texas. But McGee certainly helps Oregon. All the other players that you mentioned certainly help their teams, if not in starting roles, in depth. And now it's gotten to be injuries are a critical part of the season with the teams. So I like Looper though, transferring to Louisville. That's one to get out of the Big Ten to go there. That's a Big Ten player and Charity Looper, and she just didn't have success at UCLA.
Well, yeah, Pac-12, right? Pac-12, soon to be Big Ten for Looper. Well, Houston did grab someone from Louisville, so Louisville gets Looper. But Houston, you mentioned them, they're going to grab Nina Mbonu, who had maybe the greatest single set performance that we've ever seen last year in that Final Four matchup against Pitt. That's a big movement. LSU gets Jay Demps, as you talked about a little bit. Bree Kelly moves from Florida to Pittsburgh as Mary Wise says goodbye to a few names. Bertie Hendrickson, I think another Gator that was on the move. Pepperdine adding a lot of setters. We didn't put her on the list, but I think I looked at Pepperdine's lineup. They are looked to be loaded. They still have Zelaya, the setter, in addition to Rosemary Archer, who had the big standout weekend in Seattle, and then they add Hendrickson as well. How about this? Jordan Wilson, who used to be Jordan Middleton, who was an all-freshman standout at USC, she's on the move to Arizona. And if we stay out west, Amber Stivrins and Ani Evans are both going to U San Diego. So those could be a couple names to keep an eye on out on the West Coast. How about the big news of Melanie Parra? That's a bit of a head turner. You talked about her a little smidge against in our TCU Big 12 conversation. That could be something to maybe keep an eye on there for Coach Williams' squad. And then Purdue loses Maddie Chin, but gets Lauren Poulter, who is the youngest Poulter and another setting transfer for Dave Shondell. We saw him make the move from the Midwest last season with a setter edition. He does it again here from Denver in Lauren Poulter.
Yeah, I think all of those moves help, but some of those players are questionable. Parra has to prove herself. She has to prove she's a team player. She has to prove that it's not about her, but it's about the team. She's got to give more there, and it might just be her growing up a little bit and coming into a different culture. So I think Parra has talent. I think Jason Williams is the kind of coach that gets the most out of her. So I think that's a good move. I worry about Stivrins. This is their third school now. She was at Georgia. She was
Louisville.
touted to, and then she went to Louisville.
Louisville, then Georgia, I think.
Oh,
yeah.
Well, maybe. Okay.
Yeah.
However that works, but she hasn't found a spot. So Jen may be the coach for her out there at San Diego. A lot of players have gone there and they've been pretty comfortable. So that might be something that's really positive for Stivrins and for USD. I like that. I don't know what LSU is doing. They're getting some good players, but then I just can't figure out yet. So I need to see what that program's doing to do that. I think Oregon is trying to make a run. They've had a few setbacks up there, and I'm not sure what's happening in Florida. You mentioned the players leaving, but they've been leaving for the last 2 or 3 years, and that's bothersome because you can't get any continuity if people are in and out so fast. So and Beeson is a great loss. You know, I don't care who you are. If you lose a Beeson, you got some big numbers to replace.
Well, you talk about it. We're going to get a test right off the bat for some of these teams. San Diego is going to face Oregon on opening weekend. Penn State, Florida is always a fun one when those two tussle. BYU and Pitt seem to meet in the postseason every year. Those three are big matches. And then once again, you're going to have that Wisconsin, Baylor, TCU wrangle, this time in Minnesota on opening weekend. So those are just a few to maybe wet the beak of the volleyball fans out there. I want to know from you all, which 1 or 2 transfers stands out to you? And then maybe who is one name not going to a big team that you want to keep an eye on? I think, there's a chance that the quiet movement towards Oregon could be big. Gabby Gonzalez had the chance to really have some standout matches in her career in Ohio State. So I would keep an eye on the McGee-Gonzalez combo. Kara McGee, of course, from Baylor. But Mick, let's spend a couple minutes here at the end talking about the new wave of this Pro Volleyball Federation. I talked about a few of the coaches. Here's a list of the coaching staff. So these are the teams. It's official. It's Atlanta, Columbus, Grand Rapids, Nebraska, Orlando, and San Diego. It starts in February. It'll run until May. Todd Dagenet is going to coach in Atlanta. Angel Perez in Columbus. Kathy George makes her return, the former Michigan State Hall of Fame coach. She'll be coaching in Grand Rapids. Shelton Collier in Nebraska. Amy Pauley, who is one of the rising head coaches in the college landscape, she'll be in Orlando. And Taiba Hanif Park is going to play for Kerry Walsh's squad in San Diego. And the names of the players are out of control. We don't have time to go through all of them, but go on the website, go on the social media for Pro Volleyball Federation to take a peek. But just to say a few, right? Sydney Hilly is going to be playing in Omaha. Kendall White and Brooke Nuneviller as well. Yaciana Presley just signed, I believe, in Atlanta. What has been your first impression, of course, with all of these leagues? League One is coming and you've got Athletes Unlimited, but it certainly feels like the name recognition from the players moving to Pro Volleyball Fed is above all of the other ones.
Well, I would tell you, Master Coach has interviewed the chairman of the entire league, and he gave us some very interesting information. Not only do they have money, I mean, the reason they're going to be successful is they have money, and they're putting money into these programs. But he said there will be two more teams announced. That there will be 10 teams to start with next year. He didn't tell us who, but that's really interesting. So the question was, will those new teams coming in, will they get a late start? Because, Dagenet at Atlanta and George at Grand Rapids got a big jump on all the other teams. They got out and got some really good names. Now, some of the players that didn't jump right away see who's coming into the league. I think the last in may have the best chance at getting the top players because they now see it's going to be a great league to play in. So it's going to be really, really interesting. I think this is a serious league, Daniel, and I think in 4 or 5 years, this league draws the best players in the world. They're really into this. They've got the right idea. They've gotten their coaches out in front of it. And the people behind them have a lot of bucks, and they have other pro teams that they sponsor. So they have the know-how.
Not to mention, and this was a stat I really wish I remember, and I wish I wrote it down, and I apologize for whoever tweeted this out, but there are 3 female head coaches in the Pro Volleyball Federation, right? Kathy George, Anif Park, and Pauly. Amongst the top 5 leagues in Europe, Japan, and Brazil, there is only 1 female head coach, and that's out in Japan for the J Team Marvelous in Tomoko Yoshihara. So that's already a massive movement towards the equal rights push of female coaches. And of course, last year we finally saw that step up, right, with Jen Petrie in the Final Four and a little bit more movement in Danny Busboom Kelly. And of course, everyone's kind of hoping for that all-female Final Four one day. But this is a great movement, and it's going to be a great product, and I can't wait to see what streaming platform or TV network it'll be on. And of course, when we see updates, we'll kind of file them through with you, because this kind of feels hand in hand with what we cover, which is college women's volleyball. And we're finally hoping that there can be a next level for these women that maybe feel like academically or athletically, the combination, they don't really have a next step in America after college. And we did talk a little bit with Morgan Hentz about that a few years ago. We're going to talk with Kylie Murr about it here in a little bit. So Mick, that'll wrap up this episode. Is there anything else that you're excited for here moving into July and then early August?
Yeah, I want to throw one other thing about the Pro League in. They're going to have a draft the day after the national championship in Tampa, Florida.
Oh, wow.
So for the first time, we will have a draft of college players just finishing their eligibility for the new league. And that hasn't been announced too much out there. And that seems to me to be one of the really exciting things for college players, is to watch. I believe it's going to happen on Sunday or Monday.
Wow.
Following the tournament. Dave Wyndham out of Columbus, who is basically in charge of this whole league with Jen Spiker,
Commissioner
CEO.
Jen Spiker. Yep.
Those two are former Detroit Lions people from way back. They have family that played for the Lions. I've been a Lion fan for my entire life. So sorry that the Bobby Lane put the curse on us, but this draft is going to be exciting for the college players. So I think that's another thing that we might want to follow.
That's tremendous, and I've got some ideas for it, and I want to talk about it come August. So don't forget, stay tuned with us throughout this offseason. Follow us on Twitter at 6Rotations, and enjoy our chat with the All-American libero in Kylie Murr, who's going to chat with us about the transfer portal and so much more. So we'll be with you in just a second with Kylie. Thanks so much for watching Mick and I here once again. Happy to be joined now by the new Minnesota libero in Kylie Murr, as the new transfer portal product joins us here in our transfer portal episode here in the middle of the summer. And Kylie, I want to ask you first off, what has this summer kind of felt like? Has it felt like either the shortest or the longest summer of your college career so far?
A little bit of both. I mean, moving is always exhausting, and going to a new city is always crazy fun, but it's also flying by. Like, I've already been here for a month, And it feels like only been here for a week, but it also feels like I've been here for a month. So I don't know, a little bit of both, but it's been exciting, but a lot of new change for sure.
So walk us through, what was the point in your career or your senior season, that you kind of decided, I think I want to make a move. You could give us as much detail as there is few in that capacity. And then kind of what was the process like once you decided you wanted to make that move?
So we were in a weird spot at Ohio State. There was 6 fantastic seniors, or 5, or too many to count. And it just was really unfortunate that Ohio State didn't have the scholarships that I think we were looking for all of us. And so we kind of came together as a little group of seniors, and we're just like, if we're not all going to stay, like we're all going to find our new journeys and new paths. So it was really unfortunate in the moment, but best things can't last forever, so we knew that this was time that we needed to move on. And so it was really sad. I held hope till the last time we played in the Scarlet and Gray. Like I thought maybe, but then it just didn't work out, and by no one's fault. It just was, the COVID thing is weird and it's new, and no one knew how to kind of handle it when you have 5 people that you want to keep, but then there's also 5 or 6 new players coming in. That's hard. It's a lot to put on JFO. But so yeah, once season ended, I decided, I was like, all right, well, this is the time. I got to go into the portal. So the next day I reached out to compliance and said, this is my time. I'm going to transfer. And I didn't know that it happened so fast. I literally was in the portal within the next 20 minutes. And I thought, okay, like it'll take 1 to 3 business days, like process. No, it took me 20 minutes. And the next thing I know, my email is going crazy. I was fortunate to have a great season, great team, lots of people, lots of eyes on me. So it opened up a lot of opportunities for me. But I knew I wanted to stay in the Big Ten. So I already had limited my options there, and lots of people reached out and had a couple different directions I was going in, but ultimately Minnesota was the one that I chose, and I couldn't be happier to be here.
And I've had a relationship with Keegan Cook. It feels like everyone in the volleyball community has a certain relationship, and he was the head of the AVCA for so long, and now he's made the move from Seattle to Minnesota. Yeah. What were the deciding factors? Were you ever kind of considering, okay, the coach is the most important, the environment's the most important? What did it come down to for you? Did you make trips to the different schools or what?
Yeah, so I would say like this recruiting process looked a lot different for me than when I was 16. Just because I've grown up, I kind of know what I want. I know what I'm looking for a little bit more than I did when I was in 8th grade committing to a college. But I think the ultimate, like I knew I was only going to be here for 6 months. So I knew just what could provide me the most resources and the most help. I'm not a full developed player. Like how can I keep growing and learning in these 6 months that I'm able to have, that not everybody gets. And so after talking to a bunch of coaches and looking different ways, I'm like, do I want to make this about me and Gabby Gonzalez talked about going to the same place together, or like a bunch of us talked about doing that. But at the end of the day, we took our visits and we realized that might not be what's best for us in the long run. And it just didn't necessarily work out how we wanted. And so I'm glad that we also went on our own visits and saw different places, because we realized those were the best for us. But Minnesota specifically, I think they just not only cared about me as a person, but they made me feel valuable. They made me feel like I could bring a lot to this team, and not just like volleyball. They could bring leadership and like just an attitude that Minnesota could be missing, or just that grit. And so I don't know. I felt like they cared about me as a person. They wanted to help me beyond college volleyball, and Keegan just had a lot to offer. So it was hard to say no.
Is there a sand court out at Lord Fletcher's? Have you been out there?
I'm not sure what where that is.
That's the number 1 place in Minneapolis. You haven't been there yet. You got to look this up.
I gotta go. Yeah.
Yeah. They have a beautiful restaurant right on the lake, Lake Minnetonka, I believe.
Okay.
Have you been out there?
No.
Oh, you're missing it, girl. You got to get on top of things here.
I know.
Season 4,
so many
Mick.
lakes here. It's crazy.
Yeah, and in the summer is the only time you want to go there. Let me tell you.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
I'm going to be in Minnesota, Minneapolis in particular, at the end of July to do the high school coaches clinic.
Oh, nice.
And so I was planning on a visit out there myself. I enjoy it that much. And so I just
Have to
wondered
check
if
it
you,
out.
yeah, you got to get that on your list. That's
Yeah,
for sure.
writing it down.
Okay. All right. Have somebody zip you out there. You'll have fun.
Oh yeah.
So I have watched this portal thing. I played men's volleyball at Ball State, and of course, number one rivals Ohio State, right?
Yep.
And no matter if the school blew up, I couldn't go to Ohio State and play after competing against those guys for 4 years. I don't know how you guys do this because when back in the day when we played, it was all or nothing, and it just was that. It's been like that for life. And of course, when Sheldon Collier got the Omaha job in the new pro league, he called me right away. And I was the only guy that voted for him as MVP at Ohio State as the setter. And so I have a relationship with Ohio State. It's not necessarily the women's team, but Jim Stone played for me, and then Jim Stone and I coached against each other at various places. So I'm just curious. Did you have any misgivings about this whole process, or is it just something you accept and you jump into?
I think if I sit there and think about the misgivings and think about all the bad things, then I'm going to waste this 6 months opportunity. This wasn't ideal. This isn't what we exactly thought was going to happen, but it happened. And how am I going to deal with that moving forward? And like, if I keep thinking about, oh, what if, then I'm going to be missing the present right here in Minnesota and the amazing opportunity that I have to get to play for a historic program and a great group of girls that I think we're going to do some damage.
Can I ask you a tough question?
Yeah.
So couldn't Ohio State's athletic department have stepped up and gotten you NIL money or whatever?
I don't know. I mean, you see that happening in a lot of other places, but I'm not sure that's how Ohio State operates, especially JFO, and she's just following the rules.
So, I wasn't talking about your coach. I was talking about your athletic department.
Yeah, I mean, you would think. I don't know.
Coaches don't have $137 million income to do. But I heard Smith, your athletic director, say to the boosters, we need $37 million for NIL money for our football team. And I'm thinking, what would it cost to keep a potential national championship group together?
Yeah, that's the question.
For another 6 months, right? Another 6 months.
I'm going to grab the wheel here and move it in another direction. If you had to say, let's say that there's, a sophomore at a D2 school, or maybe someone at a low major watching, or someone in high school that is either kind of scared of the process or not quite sure exactly like what it takes. Do you need like a certain amount of courage or this or that? Like, what would you give them in terms of advice? Or maybe if you just had to have like an honest, unfiltered conversation with a young girl that wants to either go into college or is nervous about the new world that you're in, what would you say to them, Kylie?
Yeah, I would say nerves are real. They're gonna happen. The whole process is scary. It's overwhelming. Like, even as a 22-year-old going into the portal, I was still nervous. I still didn't know where my future was going to be, and I had no idea what it was going to look like. So don't come in with like this unexpected reality that it's going to be perfect and it's going to go just how you want it, because it's most likely not going to. And so I just would say, like, keep an open heart, keep an open mind. Like, the place that you visit that you probably didn't want to might end up being your favorite visit. So just take the visits, ask the hard questions, talk to the girls, like, put your coach in a little corner and ask him what you want to ask him, because if you don't ask sooner rather than later, you're going to get caught in something that you don't want to be in. So I just encourage them to have courage to ask the questions and just to be themselves. And I think you'll know when you know.
And as a vocal person, and we've watched you be vocal for 3-4 years now, do you have that same kind of mentality showing up with a new team, or do you feel like you kind of want to be quiet in a little bit to see who the other captains are, or you want to kind of assert yourself right away?
Yeah. I think as an older 5th-year grad transfer, I don't really have time to be quiet. I think I can teach these girls a lot. I think I can learn a lot from them, but I am 4 years of experience in the Big Ten, and I think I need to use my voice as much as I can. But absolutely, in my first week or so here, I took a step back and just kind of had to bite my tongue sometimes, because I wanted to see how they operated and who was speaking up and who I need to talk to and stuff like that. So a little bit just to like kind of cover my grounds, but at the same time, I'm not going to be someone I'm not. I'm going to take these girls on my back and do the thing.
And then last few questions for you. So the last time that we had you on, we did a libero episode. It was our first year of the video show, and we had you on, and Yosia from Texas, and Lauren Barnes, who is the transfer from Minnesota to Wisconsin. And after the chat with Barnes, I'm sure you've met with her before, you've chatted with her before. She's like the hard-nosed hockey player. I think that's the Minnesota mentality that people kind of go for out there. What's necessarily your either like hockey affinity? Obviously Columbus, Ohio State, very big hockey area as well. Do you feel like you'll fit in decently with the Minnesota people?
Absolutely. I think the people are going to love me. I think I'm going to bring a lot of energy and I'll bring a lot of grit and a lot of fight. And they're going to be like, who's that? And I'm going to show them, and we're going to show them what Gopher volleyball is for sure. Yeah, I'm not going to hold back.
I think they've been tired of you digging every single ball too. So it's kind of like that flip with like, hey, now I'm on your side.
Yeah, exactly. They might love me now.
and then last question, are you close? And you can be honest, are you close to anyone that's signed with this new Pro Volleyball Federation? What have you kind of heard about it? Is that something that's in the back of your mind? Or are you still kind of thinking about playing maybe somewhere else?
Yeah, it's 100% in the back of my mind. I mean, I've always wanted to play professionally, but now that it's in the States, like this is a whole new ball game and something that's so exciting. So I have tried to keep in touch. Like, I mean, there's rules and whatnot, but trying to get my name in the mix as much as I can. There's amazing players being signed, and I'm still in college. So I know the draft is coming up in November or whatnot, but I'm just trying to, as much as I do know people, I'm just trying to focus on having a good season so that my name is in the mix when November comes around.
Yeah, what's the word? It's funny, Mick and I in our episode, we were getting ready to talk about that draft, but nobody really has heard too much about it. Do you know, is it going to be during the college season or at the end of it?
I believe so. I believe it's in November. So, I mean, the season's not over till December. So I think there's 6 teams. So I think 6 girls will get 1 to each team as far as I've heard.
8 teams, I think. 8.
Okay, yeah. Whatever that is, looks like. I think there's 1 to each team and they get to pick whoever they want, I guess. But as far as I know, it's in November. So
that's going to be exciting. Wow. Yeah. Really exciting. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Kylie. Really appreciate you jumping on here in the middle of the off season.
Yeah.
Have a fantastic rest of your trip. And it feels like a trip. It's going to be like a 6-month vacation, of a lot of work.
Business trip.
Exactly. Thanks so much. We're going to wrap up this episode. She's Kylie. He's Mick, and I'm Daniel, and you're watching 6 Rotations.